Welcome to North Shore. Go ahead and take your seat again. Super glad you're here. Whether you're in this room or joining us online, we're glad you're with us as well. Two things that I want to say just to get us started. First, I just want to say thank you for all the love and care that you've shown me and my family over the past week. If you're here last Sunday, I shared a little bit about how our family's been in a very difficult season, and your words and prayers and just show of love and support have just meant the world to me. So thank you. It's been such a gift. And if you have any questions about how what we're walking through impacts the church, members of our elder board, our overseer board are going to be across the lobby in a room called Baker Room right over there after the service. Feel free to chat with them or just say thank you for all the work they're doing. They're doing a lot of hard work all the time. So that's first. And then second, I just want to name the fact that I'm not the only person in this room or listening right now that's been hoping for or praying for a miracle. As we've been walking through this series on the miracles of Jesus as they're told to us in the Gospel of John, I've had conversations with so many of you about the miracle you're praying for in your family or in that relationship or with your health or with a loved one. But for a lot of people, if you think about it, a church can sometimes feel like the last place you want to kind of open up about a serious need or struggle or burden in your life. In fact, I grew up in a church culture where when people had problems, a lot of time there'd be a lot of gossip, maybe judgment, maybe blame. Sometimes people, you just wouldn't see them anymore, like maybe they were shunned or just didn't feel comfortable being around. And I think this is one of the reasons why so many people keep their distance from the church. It's not that, it's not Jesus they're afraid of, it's the church people, which is part of the story that we're gonna explore together today. So if you have a Bible with you, one of these guys, you're welcome to open it up to the Gospel of John. You can also find a Bible app on your phone if you prefer to go that method. We've been walking with Jesus through this gospel for the past few weeks. And in addition to the miracles we've been working through, we've seen that Jesus has been getting his steps in. I mean, he has been going from Judea in the south up to Galilee in the north and back to Judea, up to Galilee, back and forth. The last two miracles we walked through were in Galilee. So the feeding of the 5,000 on that remote area east of the Sea of Galilee, and then walking on the water across the lake. But now Jesus is back in Jerusalem, and he's been teaching in the temple courts, and he's been stirring up controversy about his words and what they mean about who he is. And then we're told in the midst of that controversy, we're told, as Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Now, this wasn't a totally random kind of question. In that day, if you were suffering or if you had a disease or disability, people simply assumed it was because you sinned or your parents sinned. And there was some sort of a sense of responsibility. In fact, this idea that it could come from your parents, it was sort of assumed by many people. In fact, there were people who believed, for example, that if a pregnant woman went into a pagan temple, her child might suffer or even be born with a condition like blindness simply because she was unfaithful or disobedient. But either way, there was this very clear kind of cause and effect relationship between sin and suffering. If you were suffering, it must be somebody's sin. Somebody is at fault. A clear cause and effect. Now, just to name it so we're all on the same page, of course, this can be true, right? Choices have consequences, right? You can make choices and that can lead to your suffering or somebody else's suffering. I recently heard the story of a married couple who got into a fight and ended up giving each other the silent treatment. Anybody else ever give someone the silent treatment? You're not gonna raise your hand, I'm sure. You're gonna be quiet about it, that's fine. Well, the next day, the husband had to get up early to catch a flight, but he didn't wanna have a conversation. They were still kind of in their silent treatment mode, but he needed his wife's help because he would always sleep through his alarm. So he left her a note by her bed that said, "Please wake me up at 5 a.m. Well, the next morning he wakes up, it's like 9 a.m., he's missed his flight, he way overslept, but there's a note by his bed that said, "It's 5 a.m., wake up." So, choices have consequences. You reap what you sow, like we know that's true. And yes, sometimes we can make choices that can create pain, suffering in our lives or those around us. But that's very different than what the disciples are asking about. They simply assumed, like everyone else, that if you were blind from birth, if you had a condition like that, it still must be your sin, someone else's sin, God's punishing you or your parents. I mean, there's some sort of a cause and effect, because all suffering is the result of sin. And therefore, think about this, if you were suffering in some way, it also meant you kind of deserved it, right? Like you kind of had it coming, which would have a huge impact on how a person will be treated. I mean, you could see someone, a man born blind, and instead of seeing the person or having concern for the situation, you can go straight to a theological question or a policy question or a political question or whatever question may be about why this happened or what's going on. And you can assume maybe just because of that posture, well, maybe he just had it coming. Or maybe he did something really bad. Just like if we, in our day, we might assume if someone's living on the streets, it must mean, they made a bunch of bad choices, so they kind of had it coming. Or someone's battling addiction, it must mean they've been irresponsible in their life, so they're kind of getting what they deserve. To which Jesus says, you've got it all wrong. Look at where he says. He says, neither this man nor his parents sinned. Now pause here just for a moment. I just want to be clear. Jesus isn't saying that neither had ever sinned or there was no sin at all in their life. They've never made any mistakes. He's saying you guys are asking the wrong question. Because the question isn't whose fault is this? Why? Because that question is all about blame. And here's the thing about blame. Blame isn't the same as seeking justice or fairness in the world. The disciples weren't going out, they weren't thinking about a just or fair outcome for this guy. Blame is all about alleviating our own discomfort. And the reason I'm quick to blame is just real easy, to be real direct. It makes me feel better. It's a way to avoid feeling responsible or taking responsibility for the problem I'm encountering. So, for example, in our day, this happens all the time when someone says, well, that's all the left's fault, or that's all the right's fault, or that's the culture's fault, or that's organized religion's fault. By the way, those statements of blame, here's the thing, they don't help any people and they don't solve any problems. They don't. It's just a way to make yourself feel better that you can articulate maybe the reasons you think, and it's always more complicated. It's never as simple, but we feel better when we can say things like, who do we blame? Which is why Jesus says, sorry, wrong question. This isn't about his sin or his parents' sin or something like that. And then he says something that in a way creates an entirely new category for how to think about pain and suffering. And it might sound a little offensive or insensitive, but let's unpack it for a moment. Jesus says, it's not either their sin, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. In other words, he's saying pain can actually have a purpose. Suffering can actually be used by God so that the power of God can be on display or seen in someone's life. Now, I'll be really clear. I'm not saying that God intentionally causes pain or that we should try to enjoy suffering. But I am saying, or actually what Jesus is saying, God can use your pain and suffering. It can be the platform upon which the power and goodness of God is made visible so people can actually see it. And I know this is true because I've seen it in so many, and not just in my story, in so many stories in this room, stories of people walking through incredible loss or incredible pain and still living with joy, or still trusting God, or still investing in other people. There's a woman, many of you know in our church named Carrie, who's been in this long battle with cancer, and she's dying. The doctors are managing her symptoms and trying to, extend her life as best as they're able. But she's dying. She has weeks or maybe months to live. But if you were to sit with Carrie and her husband Todd, as I sat with them this past week, you wouldn't see a woman who's dying. You would see a woman who's filled with so much life and joy and courage and faith. If you were to talk to her, as I talked to her this past week, you wouldn't hear her complaining about, why this happened or how unfair this happened. You'd hear her talking about her 39 trips to Nicaragua and all the kids and students she's been able to care for and support. You'd hear about her children and her grandchildren who are running around her house right now every day, just with so much joy and having so much fun. In fact, Her home right now, again, in these last weeks, it's so filled with noise and laughter. This past week, she jokingly asked Todd, like, can we go back to the hospital for a few hours? Like, I just need some peace and quiet. Like, we just get, it's a lot around here. Why did she get cancer? I have no idea. Is there somebody to blame? I have no idea. But I know that God is using it so that his power and his goodness is in like full IMAX display in their home right now. And again, that doesn't mean suffering is good or that we should celebrate it or spiritualize it. And sometimes we can spiritualize pain and suffering in ways that are harmful, not helpful. But it means that God can work through even the worst situations. I mean, think about it. If you are a follower of Jesus, you know this is true. This is exactly what God did on the cross with Jesus. Jesus turned the worst moment in human history into the best moment in human history. That's why it's called Good Friday. How can that day when he's crucified on a cross and he's suffered unjustly be good? Because that's exactly what God is in the business of doing. Taking the most painful and most difficult situations and having his goodness be on display so that people can see and believe it. And that's part of what Jesus is going to explain next in these words that can be kind of curious. He goes on to say, as long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. And here he's talking more about his death, the disciples' death, basically when they're not going to be walking around the earth anymore. So he's basically saying, while we have breath in our lungs, like while we're on this earth working, we must do the works of the one who sent me, because while I'm in the world, what does he say? I am the light of the world. In other words, Jesus is saying, my identity, who I am, what I'm about, is never going to be more apparent than right now. So we've got work to do. We've got work to do. What's the work they have to do? Well, what have they been doing? What has this series been about? What have we seen in the Gospel of John? Turning water to wine, healing a child that was on the verge of death, healing a man who'd been disabled for 38 years, feeding thousands of people with just one little lunch. In fact, think about this. Given all the disciples had seen Jesus do up until this story in this moment, you would think they would have had a better question. You would have think they wouldn't start with Rabbi, who sinned? Let's talk theology. You would think they would start with Rabbi. What can you do in this man's life? I mean, we've watched you do some amazing things. So here's a guy, the situation looks dire. He's been blind from birth. There's really no hope. It's just darkness. It's literal darkness for this guy. What can you do in this man's life? Because this is who you are. And that's the question we need to be asking, not just who sinned or who can we blame, but how can God do what he does in this story? How can God shine light into darkness? How can he reveal himself through this? And not only that, friends, as disciples of Jesus, if you are a disciple of Jesus, we need to rewrite our job descriptions too. Because so often we think our job is really that, this is me. I've got to go out and show people sort of the perfect life and a great marriage and a great job. And I've got great kids who get great scholarships and everything's working out so that I can, die peacefully in my sleep when I'm 100 years old. Like that's the goal, to show everybody that. But here's the thing. First of all, that only creates insecurity and envy in other people. Second of all, if God's power shines brightest through weakness and brokenness, my job isn't to live a wrinkle-free life until I die peacefully in my sleep when I'm 100 years old. My job is to let the light of the world be on display. How? Not just through my success or great moments or when people think I'm doing a great job, but through my failures, through my weakness, through my needs, through my struggles, through my pain, through my problems. Friends, our job as a church isn't to pretend we have it all together so people will find their way here and feel bad about themselves. Our job is to create communities where weakness and brokenness is no longer hidden. Why? Because we got the light of the world in the room. We don't have to be plagued with what that darkness is doing, because Jesus is going to come in and he's going to do work in it. He's going to work through it. He's going to put who he is on display. You may never know the way he does that. Because here's the thing, when that's happening, God starts working. God starts moving. God, in fact, starts healing. Take a look at what happens next in the story. Jesus, after saying this, we're told that he spit on the ground, made some mud with saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Now, I know it's in the Bible, but I got all kinds of questions about this moment. I mean, don't you have some questions? Like, how much spit did it take? Like, how many times did he spit on the ground? And I need a little more spit. Everybody, more spit. I need you and you. Come spit on the, we gotta get some mud. And did he ask for permission? Like, hey, buddy, hang on, don't move. Are you okay if I just slam some of this into your face real quick? Like, are you okay with what's going on in the story? And the other irony is scholars, for 2,000 years, they've read this and nobody knows for sure why he even does it. I mean, it's a mystery. One of my favorite theories is that because spitting was considered unclean, he did it just to tick off the Pharisees. And I kind of like that because there's something in me that likes Jesus doing things just to make the pastors kind of mad. Like, I just feel like that's kind of funny, right? Whatever the reason is, he spits, he makes mud, he puts it on the man's eyes, but he's not instantly healed. Check out what happens next. Go, he told them, wash in the pool of Siloam. That word Siloam means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Now notice there's a gap between the mud and the miracle. Everybody see it? There's a gap between the mud and the miracle. And this is really important because it means to get to the pool, to go and get there. I love it. Just go get there. The guy, what's he doing? He's walking around like this, right? He's like, I'm going, oh, there's a person, here's a wall. Like, he's trying to make his way through. He's having to actually walk by what? Faith. Can't see. Doesn't know. Could be a practical joke. A guy put some spit and mud on my face and told me to go away. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen next, but he's gonna go find the pool, see what happens. And I love this because this is actually what following Jesus feels like in our lives, right? We feel so often like we're walking around in the dark, like trying to make sense of things like forgive your enemy. Like, what? Like, how do I, or invest in somebody else's success before your own. You're like, how is that gonna work out? Like, you're just fumbling around in the dark. Because here's the thing, sometimes you have to trust Jesus before you see Jesus, right? You gotta actually walk by faith before you see what he's gonna do. And in fact, we actually live out our lives without seeing him in person. Our whole lives are lived in this space. Our whole lives are lived there. And no, faith doesn't always lead to a miracle, but there are very few miracles that aren't preceded by this kind of blind, wondering if it's gonna work out faith. And you would think, given he has this faith and he goes home seeing. I mean, imagine this moment. Can we imagine a man who has been blind from birth? He's never seen anything. He's heard all the words for everything. And finally his eyes are open. He's like, that's what a tree looks like. I mean, it's not a big deal to us, but like how amazing that would be. He's like, oh, that's a bird. I finally see what one looks like. And maybe he came across a mirror and he's like, oh my gosh, that's what I look like? Oh no, why didn't anybody say anything? Like, goodness, like what, I gotta get myself together. He's having all these moments of like revelation, all these moments, and you'd think it would be like this celebratory, exciting, everybody high-fiving, there's been a miracle, the church is gonna go, it's gonna celebrate, everything's in a good place. But it's here, in this moment, the high point, you would think of the story, where the story begins to take a very different kind of turn. He goes home. His neighbors aren't really sure he's the guy or the same guy. And so we're told, a few verses later, that they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now this, of course, right here, this is something that would have been procedurally appropriate if someone was unclean in some way and they were made clean by someone, or there was a healing, they would have to go present themselves and kind of be officially like marked off as clean in some way. So he goes to do that. And then we're told now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes, and he didn't say heal him. Listen to this, that Jesus made the mud. We're gonna come back to that. The day he made the mud and opened the man's eyes was what? Sabbath. Now, why does that matter? Well, if you know the scriptures, if you know first century Judaism, you know that there were a number of things people couldn't do, weren't supposed to do, were forbidden to do on the Sabbath, the Shabbat, which was Saturday. There were actually 39 things that you couldn't do on the Sabbath. They're called the melachot in Hebrew. And I want to put them up on the board for you so you can see all the things you can't do. And there's some kind of wild ones up there. You know, I didn't know that you weren't allowed to, number 4, finish things. My son would love this. He never finishes a thing in his life. He's like, I don't know how to finish that at all. There's so many things about that. Now leave that up there because I want you to kind of hold this list in your mind. Hold the list in your mind And imagine this is a clipboard. You got a clipboard, you got all 39, you got boxes to check, and you're trying to find out what this is all about. Pharisees, next thing. Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. They're not excited. They're not going like, I got a friend in my life that needs a miracle. Where'd you go? They got the clipboard out. They're waiting to see, and look what he says. He put mud on my eyes. Well, how do you make mud? You take spit and dirt, and what do? Number 23, you got to knead that. Okay, check. We got a problem in the story. Okay, they go on. The man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Well, gosh, that's number 8 on the list. Now we got 2 problems in the story. So we don't have a miracle here. We got violation after violation after violation of the rules and the regulations that keep our community safe and sound and in order, right? So at least 2 rules were broken. And so you can take the list down now. The Pharisees said, some of them did at least, this man is not from God. He can't be from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. We got proof. There's 2 boxes at least checked off on the list. But of course, some of them at least had the intellectual honesty to say, wait, time out. I mean, how could a sinner do this? How could a sinner perform such signs? So we're told they were divided. They weren't clear. But not for long. We're told in a few verses later, they go to see the man's parents, and they ask the man's parents, is this your son? Was he blind from birth? How did this happen? And his parents say, he is our son. He was blind from birth, but we don't know how. In fact, you need to ask him. We're actually told they were afraid of the Pharisees' response, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But they say, you got to go back to the guy. And so a few verses later, check this out. A second time, they summon the man who had been blind. I mean, the guy is just trying to, he's having the most glorious day of his life. He's like, call back to the principal's office. Here I go. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. No longer divided, are they? Doesn't take long for a group of people together to come together and say, oops, whatever questions we have, we don't look at those questions. We're not going to ask those questions. We don't need to be curious. We're going to have a plan. We know this man is a sinner. And he replied, and I love this, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. He doesn't know anything about Jesus. He's not theologically trained. All I know, he says, is I was blind, but now I see. And just kind of a side note on this moment, if you've ever struggled to know how to talk about Jesus or faith in your life or in the complicated world we live in, where it's so hard to, talk about things like that, this is a great place to start. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything about God. You don't have to answer every question they might ask about faith and how it applies to whatever it may be. You just need to be able to say what Jesus has actually done in your life, according to you, right? You just have to be able to say it. Things like, I was an addict, but now I'm sober. Or I was working to prove myself every day, but now I know I'm somebody, I'm loved. Or I was angry at the whole world. I was just so angry, now I feel this peace on the inside. Or I was going from relationship to relationship to relationship, but now I just feel this level of wholeness and love, like I'm in a different place. See, sometimes I think we just overcomplicate it a little bit, don't we? I know as a pastor, I do this a ton. When at the end of the day, the most powerful testimony you can give to someone else about Jesus is, I was this, and now I'm this. I was blind, and now I see. And ironically, it's not typically the skeptics who are pushing back and bothered by these stories. In fact, they're often curious and want to know more. You know who's doesn't respond well to the story in this? Not the skeptic. It's the church person. Let's go back. And so then the Pharisees, they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? They're kind of keeping the clipboard out. And he answered, have I told you already and you did not listen? Why do you want to hear it again? I love this. Do you want to become his disciples too? By the way, if you've ever wondered if there's sarcasm in the Bible, so you have a good example right here, right? He's not gonna walk them through the 4 spiritual laws. He's like, okay, do you want to know the guy? Can you leave me alone? I've answered your questions. Do you want to be this as well? And so what do? How do they respond to this? It says they hurled insults at him. Some of you have been there before. And said, you are this fellow's disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, the guy you're following, we don't even know where he comes from. It's like we're right by a technicality, or we're right because we just haven't even seen him yet. And then the man answers, now that is remarkable, isn't it? You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. In other words, yeah, you know where he comes from. You know exactly where he comes from. We know that God does not listen to sinners. Someone like me, he would be saying. He listens to the godly person who does his will. I guess that's you in the story, Pharisees. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. In other words, if Jesus is who you're saying he is, I wouldn't be standing here looking at you with my eyes. But the fact that I'm standing here looking at you with my eyes, because that's true, maybe you should reconsider who he is. And by the way, that took a ton of guts, right? For a guy who's not theologically trained, he doesn't have a seminary education, he's not, never been to pastor classes, to tell a group of people who know the scriptures by heart, they follow every letter of the law, to tell them basically, guys, you're the ones who are blind. You're the ones who are actually walking around in the dark, which they were, and which was true. And in a way, it gave them an opportunity to maybe say, wow, maybe he's right. Maybe we should reconsider. Maybe we should hear the story. But how do they respond? To this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And what'd they do? And they threw him out. They threw him out. And because it goes back to this, you, not me, you were the one in sin. I don't have to listen to you. You're the one with the problems. You're the one with the bad resume. You're the one with the mistake in your past. You're the one that went through the divorce. You're the one who's been the addict. You're the one who's made all the bad choices. You, and you. How dare you lecture me? I'm the one who's got the resume. I'm the one who's been at church every weekend. I'm the one who knows the rules. I'm the one who can parse that in Greek and Hebrew. How dare you lecture me? Threw him out. They're not asking who's to blame at this point. They already know who's to blame. Guess what? It's somebody else. It's you, not me. It's you, not me. Clearly you, not me. And this happens to us. We get into this mode. We get into this mode actually in all kinds of subtle ways. In fact, some of you that are hearing this, you're doing it right now. You don't know it, because I was doing it all this week when at the end of the story, what did I think to myself? You Pharisees, how hypocritical of you, and how dare you? You Pharisees, we should throw you out. Which of course is the same sin. It's the same blindness. It's the same problem that they had. Honestly, it kind of makes me wonder, who's really blind in this story? Ever thought about that? Maybe it's not just them. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's you. Maybe we are just as likely to be spiritually blind, even willfully blind. Maybe we're just as likely to see problems rather than people, or to assign blame rather than ask the question, I wonder what God's doing in this story. I wonder what the light of the world wants to do in this moment. By the way, I talked about this at the beginning. You know why people are afraid to be in churches today? They're afraid of this. Friends, I gotta be honest, people aren't afraid of the rules. People are looking for rules. People are looking for a way of life that actually can heal or help build relationships, or help them raise their kids, or help them make sense of their life, give them purpose. People are looking for rules. They're not afraid of rules. You know what they're afraid of? They're afraid of the rule keepers. The people who wield the rules to solve other people's problems rather than letting the light of the world shine into their own. But in spite of all the Pharisees knew about God, in spite of all the way they could lecture other people, it's so interesting if you read through the story, they're the only ones in the story who never really see Jesus. See, you can know a lot of the answers, you can know all about doctrine, you can know so much about God, and that's a good thing. It's a really good thing. It's a necessary thing, but you can know it and still be blind, unable to see. In fact, the one person, or the primary person who sees Jesus in the story, get this, is the person that everybody else thought was what? Isn't that Interesting. That the people that so often people like in my shoes write off or blame or just walk by are the ones who are having the radical, transformative, life-changing encounter with Jesus. In fact, check out what Jesus does next. I love this so much. Jesus, he heard they had thrown him out. By the way, if you've experienced something like that in a religious community, Jesus knows. God knows. And look at this, when he found him, he was looking for him. He saw him at the beginning, but he went and found him and he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir?" The man asked, "Tell me so that I may believe in him." And then Jesus said, and these words should now have so much more meaning as we hear them. He says, "You have now seen him." Now you can see. You thought your eyes were open before, but now you see why. Because the one you are looking for is the one who is speaking with you. And the man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. See, friends, the real miracle in the story isn't that he walked home able to see trees and birds and houses and stuff like that. The real miracle in the story is who he came to see Jesus as. He went from Jesus as just this person to maybe he's a prophet, to maybe he was sent from heaven, to the fact he's actually the Lord and God of the universe. And now he's fully surrendered. His life fully surrendered over to him. And Jesus can do this in your life. He can open your eyes to who he is. No matter how steeped in sin or pain or suffering you are, he can open your eyes to who he is. In fact, that's a great prayer to pray. Jesus, open my eyes to the work you're doing in my life. Open my eyes to your presence in spite of my pain or my mistakes or my shame or my past. Help me see you as the light of the world stepping into my darkness. Open my eyes. And get this, when you do this, when you see him for who he truly is, you don't have to worry about who to blame anymore. You don't. Look at what Jesus says, his last words. And Jesus said, "It is for judgment that I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become what? Blind." In other words, Jesus is in charge of the judging. Not you, not me. This is really good news. We're no good at doing it. Jesus is in charge of the judging. It's good news because unlike you or me, he knows every detail of every story. He knows what I'm responsible for. He knows what you're responsible for. He knows what they out there are responsible for. But more importantly, he took all those things that we're all responsible for and he put them on the cross. He took the blame that we all deserve. Why? So that the work of God might be displayed in you and in me. So we don't have to be in charge of the blame. We can leave judgment with Jesus. We can show mercy to others. We can tell the truth about what we've done. We can be a church that doesn't put people out, but instead sees people and finds people, and through the power of the Holy Spirit helps open their eyes to who Jesus really is. The light of this world, working his grace and goodness in every place where darkness seems to reign. Open your eyes. We'll take a moment and just make that our prayer together right now. So if you close your eyes for a moment, just close your eyes. And you can just be in a posture. Maybe you just want to be in a posture with your eyes closed of just recognizing this is how it feels right now to be going through life. It just feels like there's darkness or you can't see clearly the path ahead, the choice you need to make. Maybe you can't see because of something in your past that feels like it's blinding you or a barrier of sin or shame or guilt. Maybe you actually resonated with those Pharisees. I know I did, where it feels like you've been walking around a bit more with a clipboard, assessing what's wrong with the world, what's wrong in the schools, what's wrong in our city, what's wrong with the government, checking off the boxes. Well, they didn't do this, or they did that, or they did this, or they did that. It's all their fault. They are to blame. And I just want you to invite you right now, just put down the clipboard. It's for Jesus came, he's in charge of judgment. He can do it. And he's taken all the sin of this world, he's taken it to that cross. He experienced the worst so that God's best could be seen in each of us. And so in the midst of whatever is going on in your life, with your eyes closed, I just want you to pray in your heart these simple words: Jesus, open my eyes. Jesus, help me see. Either because you feel like you're stumbling around in the dark, or your heart is filled with bitterness and blame, or maybe because you feel like you've been thrown out. You've been left on the side of the road. You've been a subject of gossip or rumor. Jesus sees you, and he's come into this world to find you. And by walking with him and trusting him in the darkness, your eyes can be opened, just like this man in the story, slowly but surely, one step at a time, opened more and more to who he really is, how much he loves you, and the light that can be true in your life. And his promise is, and this is the good news that we're gonna wrap with, his good news can be seen, his gospel, his truth can be seen in you by others. And so Jesus, thank you for opening our eyes. Thank you for coming to this world. We want to be part of the work you're doing, but it begins with us allowing you to be in that darkness in us. Be the light in us. Help us tell the truth about who we are, knowing that you are the light of the world, and your light shines best in places that might seem to others the darkest. Jesus, we thank you for your cross. We thank you that we can come to the cross just as we are and experience the true goodness, the true beauty of who you are, your grace and goodness and salvation fully on display at that cross. So we're gonna gather right now at the foot of the cross, worshiping you as our Lord and Savior. And we do that, Jesus, in your name. And everybody prayed, amen. You can open your eyes.